Hello everyone, my name is Alec, I'm a sitar player, teacher and researcher, and in this video I'm going to be discussing the North Indian Raga system. Raga is the central, most important concept in North Indian classical music, guiding every aspect of this music's melodic dimension. Basically, if a performance is not set to a particular raga, it is simply not considered classical, which is why it is so important to properly understand this concept and its musical implications in order to fully appreciate a Hindustani performance. Unfortunately, it is also one of the hardest concepts for people to understand, as nothing really like it exists in the West. So what is a raga and how does this concept play out throughout a performance? Well, there are various ways of describing what a raga is. On a practical level, ragas are often defined as melodic frameworks for composition and improvisation, guiding every aspect of how phrases, patterns, and large-scale melodic structures are generated throughout a performance. Essentially, the raga tells the musician which notes and combinations of notes can be used and which ones must be avoided. Although it is impossible to provide a specific number, there are something like 150 to 200 different ragas performed today, each of which prescribes a unique and specific way of navigating tonal space. Within this clearly prescribed melodic framework, the musician is then free to explore melodic possibilities according to his or her style, taste, and tradition. Therefore, one really interesting aspect about how the raga system works is that it simultaneously imposes strict restrictions regarding what may or may not be done, while at the same time allowing the freedom to improvise within this melodic space. On a more subtle level, each raga is considered to have its own mood and expressive character, and the goal of the musician is to both express and embody the rag's unique set of emotions through his or her playing. Some ragas, such as Bilaskani Todi, which we heard earlier, can be deep and introspective, while other ragas, such as Mishra Kamaj, which we're listening to right now, can have a lighter and more romantic character. In fact, the word raga is said to be etymologically derived from the Sanskrit word ranj, meaning color, and ragas are often poetically described as that which colors the mind, meaning that which affects one's feelings and conscious states. In relation to this, most ragas are meant to be performed at a specific time of the day or season, as this helps enhance the raga's particular expressive character. The more serious ragas are typically performed either late at night or early in the morning, as this is considered to be the most auspicious time for introspection, whereas lighter, more romantic ragas tend to be performed in the evening.
तोरी मोरे मोरे तोरे ना बनेगी शाम तोरी मोरे मोरे तोरे ना बनेगी शाम तोरी मोरे मोरे तोरे ना बनेगी शाम तोरी मोरे.
Lastly, on a broader cultural level, Ragas are often perceived and described as real musical beings with human or godlike qualities. This led to the Raga Ragini classification system dating back to the 11th century, which postulated 6 masculine ragas, often pentatonic, each having 5 or 6 female Ragini consorts. Although the Raga Ragini classification system has fallen into disuse, the perception of ragas as real and autonomous musical entities continues to this day. In fact, musicians will often describe their processes of learning and performing a raga as that of a relationship with another being that one gets to know and connect with. Ideally, musicians are not meant to perform a raga. Instead, they are meant to put their personal egos aside and allow the raga to express its own self. चलो हटो चले जाओ सोतिन के धाम चलो हटो चले जाओ In order to properly discuss the North Indian raga system, we must first become familiar with Indian music's particular approach to pitch and tuning, which is overall quite similar to Western music, although also distinct in some important ways. Indian music uses a solfege system called sargam, which, just like Western music, is based on 7 main notes or swaras, as they are referred to in Indian terminology. The name of these 7 notes is Shadja, Rishab, Gandhar, Madhyam, Pancham, Daivat and Nishad, or in their more common abbreviated form, Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni. Out of these 7 notes, Sa and Pa, the first and fifth notes of the scale, are fixed, as they only exist in one single position. In contrast, the remaining 5 notes, Re, Ga, Ma, Dha and Ni, are movable notes, as each has 2 positions a half tone apart. A natural or Shuddha position, which essentially coincides with the Western major scale, and an altered position, which in the case of Re, Ga, Da and Ni lies a half step below the natural note, and which in the case of Ma lies a half step above it. Lowered notes are referred to as Komal, and the raised note is referred to as Tibra. As you can see in the table, the Indian melodic system is based on a scale of 12 roughly equidistant tones, which is essentially very similar to the Western 12-note chromatic scale. However, there are some important differences worth understanding. The first difference is that, whereas in Western music each note name implies a specific frequency, for instance, A4 implies a note vibrating at exactly 440 Hz, the Indian solfege system is entirely movable, meaning that any frequency can be assigned as the tonic and starting note Sa, and every other note in the scale will be tuned in relation to that initial note. For instance, most sitarists will typically tune their sitars to the key of D. The reason for this is simply that this is the tuning sitars are built for. Other instruments will tune Sa to a different note according to their own design, whereas singers may choose to tune their Sa to whatever frequency best suits their own particular range. The other difference is that, whereas Western music is typically based on a strict tuning system referred to as equal temperament, meaning that each semitone or half step is equal in size, the Indian approach to tuning is more flexible, based primarily on what is referred to as just intonation, but also allowing for small shifts in the tuning of each note according to rag and context. This is a topic which I hope to be discussing in more detail in future videos. One of the main things that distinguishes Indian classical music from Western music is that, Whereas most Western music, both classical and popular, is typically based on at least 2 or 3 chords, usually a lot more, Indian classical music has no chord changes. Instead, an entire performance, which may often last an hour or more, will always be based on a single unchanging chord, a musical feature which in Western music theory is referred to as a drone. This drone sound is typically produced by a stringed instrument called a tanpura, which, as you can see, somewhat resembles a sitar, though with only 4 strings and no frets. The strings are always played in an open manner, meaning that their pitch will remain constant throughout. The most common way of tuning a tanpura is by having 3 of its 4 strings tuned to the tonic note sa, plus the 4th string, which can either be tuned to the 5th note pa, the 4th note ma, or the major 7th note, shuddha-ni. As you can hear, just changing this one note in the drone can have quite a remarkable effect. The tuning with the 7th note ni can certainly sound rather harsh and unsettling for someone who isn't used to it. But even the difference between the tuning with the 5th and the 4th is quite noticeable and interesting. To me, the tuning with the 4th note ma has a somewhat more subdued and mysterious quality when compared with the 5th. This is probably because having the 4th note weakens the tonic, as it subverts our natural expectations, based both on musical habit and the harmonic series, of always hearing the tonic together with its 5th. Of these 3 types of tuning, the first one using pa is the most common, and the last one using ni is the rarest. Now that we're familiar with the basics of pitch and tuning, we can begin to look in more detail at how ragas are defined and categorized. The most basic way in which a raga can be defined is according to its scale, or in other words, by the notes that can be used and by extension by the notes that must be avoided. Every raga is constituted by a specific subset of notes from the total 12 notes of the chromatic scale, and this is the first and arguably the most fundamental way in which ragas are delineated. In fact, one of the great things about Indian classical music is its huge variety of scales, especially when compared with Western music, which is essentially based on 2 main ones, major and minor, plus a few more on the side. In contrast, Indian music is based on countless scales, some of which are commonly found in Western music, but many of which are not. Theoretically, ragas may consist of scales of 5, 6 or 7 notes, referred to as Audav, Shadav and Sampurna. Ragas with more than 7 notes are also referred to as Sampurna, meaning complete, as they display at least one version of each scale degree. Over the years, Indian musicologists have tried to categorize all ragas into a small number of fundamental or parent scales, referred to as tats in North Indian terminology. The most famous effort in this regard, and the one which has had the strongest impact on how the raga system is theorized today, came from Indian musicologist Vishnu Narayan Bhatkande, who proposed a system consisting of 10 parent scales. Out of these 10 scales, the first 6 coincide with the 6 modes in Western music theory. The remaining 4 scales, though, are a lot more exotic from a Western perspective. While useful, this system does have its problems, as many ragas do not fall within this simple categorization. Furthermore, what is really important, and sometimes quite difficult for people who are new to this music to understand, is that the scale alone doesn't define the raga. In other words, a raga is a lot more than just a scale, and in fact many ragas have the same scale but are nevertheless totally different. A more accurate way of describing and categorizing ragas is according to their ascending and descending motion, referred to as arohi and avarohi. In other words, in addition to prescribing what notes can or cannot be used, many ragas are also defined by how one goes up and down the scale, contributing further to their unique melodic and expressive character. To help understand what this means, let's take a look at Rag Yaman, which happens to be one of the ragas which students traditionally learned first. Rag Yaman is based on what in Indian terminology is referred to as Kalyan That, and in Western terminology as either a Lydian mode or a major scale with a raised fourth degree. However, what gives Yaman its unique character and what makes it more than just a scale is that one must always go up the scale by skipping the first and fifth notes, sa and pa, like demonstrated here. What this means in practice is that throughout an entire Yaman performance, the musician will consistently avoid playing sa and pa in any kind of ascending motion. Theoretically, the ascending and descending motion of each raga can be categorized according to two main features. The first involves the number of notes used in ascent or descent, which can typically range from 5 to 7. If we look at what happens in Rag Yaman, the ascending scale consists of only 5 notes, while the descending scale includes all 7. In other words, it has an audav or pentatonic ascending scale and a sampurna or heptatonic descending scale. The other main property by which a raga's ascending and descending scale can be described is by its chalan, meaning its movement or motion. This term can be used in various ways, but its most basic use refers to whether one goes up and down the scale in a straight manner, referred to as shuddha, or in a crooked manner, referred to as vakra. To demonstrate what this means, let's take a look at Rag Koshi Kannada, which is based on a minor scale, or what is referred to as Asawari Tat in Indian terminology. In this rag, one must always skip the second and fifth notes of the scale, re and pa, while going up, and play all 7 notes while going down. However, rather than playing these 7 notes in a straight manner, one must include certain turns, as demonstrated here. As an interesting side note, the reason for this is that Koshi Kannada is actually a combination of 2 different and very popular ragas, Malkons and Darbari, and this combination is expressed by this raga's ascending and descending motion. Specifically, the ascending scale is based on Rag Malkons and the descending scale is based on Rag Darbari, which is characterized in part by its crooked motion. One other important way in which ragas are described and categorized is according to the function and significance attached to each note. This approach goes all the way back to the ancient music treatise Natya Shastra from around the 3rd century BCE, which postulated 4 distinct note functionalities, referred to as Vadi, the main note, Samvadi, the secondary main note, Vivadi, dissonant notes, and Anuvadi, neutral notes. Of these terms, only Vadi and Samvadi are of general use in contemporary music practice. In theory, every raga has one main note, its Vadi, and one secondary main note, its Samvadi, meaning that most phrases will tend to resolve around these main notes. According to Bhatkande's theoretical system, these Vadi and Samvadi notes must always be situated either a 5th or a 4th away from each other. So for instance, in the case of Rag Yaman, the Vadi and Samvadi notes are Ga and Ni, which are separated by an interval of a 5th, whereas in the case of Rag Koshi Kannada, the Vadi and Samvadi notes are Ma and Sa, which are separated by an interval of a 4th. In this regard, it is worth noting that while the tonic note sa is always the most important and fundamental note of any raga, it does not usually act as the vadi note. The main reason for this is simple. Sa is the one note that absolutely all ragas include. Therefore, emphasizing this note does not contribute towards a rag's distinct personality in any way. As with the ascending and descending scales explored earlier, this apparently minor detail can have a huge impact in delineating each raga's unique melodic character. For instance, emphasizing a consonant note, such as the major third or the perfect fifth, will automatically highlight that raga's consonant character, whereas emphasizing a dissonant note, such as the minor second or the augmented fourth, can have the opposite effect. While there are many more features by which ragas are defined and categorized, these are arguably the three main ones. Together, these three features help create melodic frameworks with unique expressive qualities and which, through cultural processes of learning, listening and performing, come to be perceived and experienced as distinct musical beings. And this is what the raga system is ultimately all about. Well, that's all for now. There is certainly a lot more that could be said about how ragas are theorized and performed, but I'll be saving that for future videos. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon.